Good morning, children. Today, we're going to dive into the simple present tense and the present continuous tense. These are two important verb tenses in English that we use to talk about actions and states. Let's start with the simple present tense.
Excuse me, teacher. What's the simple present tense?
The simple present tense is used to describe actions or situations that are general, habitual, or always true. It's not tied to a specific point in time. For example, I eat breakfast every morning. The action of eating breakfast is habitual, and it doesn't specify when it's happening.
So, like, it's used for routines?
Yes, exactly. Routines, general truths, and facts are all examples of when we use the simple present tense. Now, let's contrast that with the present continuous tense.
What's the present continuous tense?
The present continuous tense, also known as the present progressive tense, is used to describe actions or situations that are happening right now or around the current time. It's about actions that are in progress, not necessarily habitual or continuous. For example, I'm studying for my exam. It's something happening at this moment.
So, like, we are learning the present continuous tense now.
Exactly, Julian. You applied the tense cleverly. The present continuous tense is for actions happening at the moment or around the current time. If you want to talk about a daily routine, you would say, I study for my exams every day, using the simple present tense.
So, the simple present is for things that are always true, while the present continuous is for things happening right now?
Yes, that's a good way to summarize it. The simple present is for general truths and habitual actions, and the present continuous is for actions in progress at the moment.
I'm still a bit confused. Can you give us more examples?
Of course. Let's do some more examples to clarify. Simple present tense, 1. She lives in New York. A fact or permanent situation. 2. They always eat dinner at 7 p.m. Habitual action. 3. The sun rises in the east. General truth. Present continuous tense, 1. I am reading a book. Action in progress right now. 2. They are playing soccer at the park. Current action. 3. She is talking on the phone. Ongoing action.
Oh, I think I'm starting to get it. Thanks for the examples.
You're welcome, Julian. Remember, the context and the time frame of the action help determine which tense to use. Does anyone else have questions or need more examples?
I have a question about negations. How do we make negative sentences in these tenses?
That's a good question. In the simple present tense, you generally add don't, do not, or doesn't, does not, before the base form of the verb. For example, I don't like coffee or she doesn't play the piano. In the present continuous tense, you add not after the form of to be, am, is, are, and before the main verb in its ing form. For example, I'm not watching TV right now or they are not working on the project today.
And what about questions? How do we make questions with these tenses?
You are sort of like directing me. That's so helpful, Julian. Then again, it's a good question. To form questions in the simple present tense, you often start the sentence with the auxiliary verb do or does, followed by the subject in the base form of the verb. For example, do you like ice cream? Or does he work here? In the present continuous tense, you start the sentence with the auxiliary verb am, is, or are, followed by the subject, and then the main verb in its ing form. For example, are you studying for the test? Or is she reading a book?
What if I want to ask about a future action?
That's a great question, Julian. If you want to ask about a future action, you generally use the present continuous tense. For example, are you going to the party tomorrow? Or is she meeting her friend on Saturday? It's a way to discuss future plans or actions that are certain to happen.
Can we use the simple present for future actions too?
Yes, you can, but it's typically used for scheduled events or fixed timetables. For example, the train leaves at 8 a.m. tomorrow or my flight arrives at 3 p.m. The key is that these actions are scheduled and certain to happen in the future.
I think I understand now. Thank you, teacher.
You're welcome, Julian. It's great to see you grasping the concepts. Remember, practice is key when it comes to using these tenses correctly. So, keep practicing in your writing and speaking. Any more questions before we move on to some exercises?
Can you give us some exercises to practice?
Of course. Let's start with a few exercises to reinforce what we've learned. Exercise 1, Simple Present or Present Continuous. Fill in the blanks with the correct form of the verb in either the simple present or the present continuous tense. 1. I usually watch TV in the evening. 2. They play basketball at the moment. 3. She read a book every night. We not study for the test right now. Exercise 2, Questions. Form questions with the given prompts using the appropriate tense. 1. You listen to music now? 2. He like ice cream? 3. They meet their friends tomorrow? She speak French fluently? Feel free to answer these exercises, and I'll check your work next week. This will help us practice and solidify our understanding.
I have a question about the verbs that are exceptions in the simple present tense. Like go becomes goes in the third person. Can you explain that?
Certainly. In the simple present tense, most verbs follow the basic pattern of adding s or es to the base form in the third person singular, he, she, it. For example, I go to the store, but he goes to the store. The verbs that are exceptions include those that end in s, x, z, sh, and ch. In these cases, you add es instead of s to the third person singular. For example, I wash my car, but she washes her car. The same rule applies to verbs like fix, buzz, kiss, and watch.
What about irregular verbs in the simple present tense? How do they work?
Irregular verbs don't follow the standard rules for conjugation. Instead, they have unique forms in the simple present tense. For example, I have, he has, and they have use have as the base form, and there are other irregular verbs like be, do, and go that have their own unique forms. It's best to memorize these irregular verb forms because they don't follow a consistent pattern.
So, it's important to know both regular and irregular verbs to use the simple present tense correctly?
Exactly, Julian. Knowing the difference between regular and irregular verbs is crucial for using the simple present tense accurately. Regular verbs follow the standard pattern, while irregular verbs have unique forms that need to be memorized.
What about the present continuous tense? Are there any exceptions or irregularities?
In the present continuous tense, there aren't the same kinds of irregularities as you find with irregular verbs in the simple present tense. The key is to understand how to form the tense by using the present participle, the ing form of the verb, with the appropriate form of to be, am, is, are. For example, I am eating, she is studying, they are playing.
So, in the present continuous tense, it's pretty straightforward?
Yes, the present continuous tense is relatively straightforward when it comes to verb conjugation. The main thing to remember is how to use the present participle with to be. If you have that down, you can construct sentences in the present continuous tense easily.
I have a question about using adverbs of frequency with the simple present tense. How does that work?
That's a great question. Adverbs of frequency, like always, usually, often, sometimes, and rarely, are commonly used with the simple present tense to indicate how often an action occurs. For example, I always go to the gym. She rarely watches TV. They usually eat dinner at 6 p.m. Adverbs of frequency typically come before the main verb. If you're using an auxiliary verb like do or does for questions or negatives, the adverb of frequency comes after the auxiliary verb. For example, do you always eat breakfast? He doesn't often go to the movies. These adverbs help provide more context and detail about the frequency of actions in the simple present tense.
I think I'm getting the hang of it. Thanks, teacher.
You're welcome, Julian. It's great to see your progress. If there are no more questions or if anyone wants to share their exercise answers, we can move on to some more exercises or practice speaking in these tenses.
I'd like to do more exercises.
Excellent. Let's do a few more exercises to reinforce what we've learned. Exercise 3, Simple Present or Present Continuous. Fill in the blanks with the correct form of the verb in either the simple present or the present continuous tense. 1. She, usually, drink tea in the morning. 2. They play football right now. 3. He not watch TV at the moment. We often visit the museum on weekends. Exercise 4, Questions. Form questions with the given prompts using the appropriate tense. 1. You read a book now? 2. She go to the gym every day? 3. They cook dinner tonight? He talk to his friends right now? Feel free to answer these exercises, and I'll check your work afterward. This will help us practice and solidify our understanding further.
I have a question about using the present continuous tense to express future plans. Can you clarify that a bit more?
Certainly. Using the present continuous tense to express future plans is quite common in English. When we use the present continuous for future plans, it means that the plans are already made, certain, and in the near future. This is often the case with appointments, events, or arrangements. For example, I am meeting my friend for lunch tomorrow. She is traveling to Paris next week. They are having a party on Saturday. The important thing to remember is that when using the present continuous for future plans, there is an implied sense of certainty, and the action is happening soon.
Can we use the simple present tense for future plans too?
Yes, you can use the simple present tense for future plans, but it's typically reserved for fixed schedules, timetables, or events that are certain to happen in the future. For example, the train leaves at 8 a.m. tomorrow. My flight arrives at 3 p.m. In these cases, the action is scheduled and definite. So, the choice between the simple present and present continuous for future plans depends on the context and the level of certainty.
Thanks for clarifying that, teacher.
You're welcome, Jillian.